Good morning. I want to thank Steve Cushman and the rest of the staff at the Chamber of Commerce for hosting the event once again this year. The State of the City is a great event for our city leaders and businesses to come together and share our vision for the year ahead. Santa Barbara's first State of the City event was started by the late Harriet Miller in her last year as mayor and carried forward by Mayor Marty Bloom. As I begin my first year as mayor, I'm honored to continue the annual tradition. After the highest voter turnout in 30 years for a standalone municipal election last November, we have a very new council to work on your behalf. Last year's vote-by-mail election both saved money and increased voter participation, with 50% of registered voters mailing in or handing in their ballots. On January 12th, a new council was sworn in, and ever since, we've been actively engaged on many things. During these last 2 months' time, this council rolled up their sleeves to deal with some weighty issues, from medical cannabis dispensary collective dispensaries and to spay-neuter ordinances, and now to our general plan update. We are poised now to move ahead this spring and tackle the city budget. The next few months won't be easy, and yet this council is ready and charged with setting spending priorities and making the hard decisions. Let me introduce you to my colleagues on the City Council. First, our continuing members, Councilmember Dale Francisco and Councilmember Doss Williams. Joining re-elected, go ahead. Joining re-elected Councilmember and Mayor Pro Tem Grant House. And introducing newly elected council members Bendy White, Frank Hotchkiss, and Michael Self. Also seated throughout the room this morning is our city's exemplary executive management team. And please wave as I call your names. City Administrators Jim Armstrong, City Attorney Steve Wiley, Assistant City Administrator Marcelo Lopez and Paul Casey, Airport Director Karen Ramsdale, Waterfront Director John Bridley, Police Chief Cam Sanchez, Parks and Recreation Director Nancy Rapp, Library Director Irene Macias, Public Works Director Christine Anderson, newly installed Fire Chief Andy DiMizio, and Interim Finance Director Bob Samario. Thank you. I want to start my comments by acknowledging that we are all somehow personally and professionally feeling the effects of the economic downturn. These are tough times, and many businesses are doing whatever it takes to make ends meet. Like you, we're trying to determine how long the recession will continue and understand that these tough times will not be over in the near future. Unemployment in Santa Barbara County has reached 10%, and it's 12% statewide. While some people are out of work completely, others have reduced hours, lost benefits, and are contemplating how much longer they will be able to keep their jobs. Overall, we're seeing the effects of people spending less and delaying big expenses. People are cutting back on vacations, negatively affecting our hotels and businesses, making us work harder to attract tourism to Santa Barbara. It's a negative cycle, and our local businesses are often the hardest hit. Even Santa Barbara's strong philanthropic community is changing how they allocate grant funds for our many nonprofit organizations as their investment pools shrink and the need for immediate and emergency services grow. And yet, we know that Santa Barbara is a resilient community. Time and again, we look past our obstacles, seek innovative solutions, and find new opportunities. As I look throughout this room, I see leaders representing businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies. I speak to each of you when I say that our challenge today is to develop creative solutions to reach our full potential tomorrow. We know the saying, when the one door shuts, a window opens. And by working together, we can and will find new opportunities that lie before us and pull us through. This is our strength as a community. We've seen how our community comes together in times of crises before, especially these last few years as Santa Barbara has seen its fair share of natural disasters. Throughout numerous fires, the Gap Fire in July 2008, the Tea Fire that November, which destroyed 210 homes, and last May's Jesucita Fire, which destroyed another 80 homes, Out of tragedy and immense loss to so many residents, we came together to assist in every way possible. Over 30,000 people were required to evacuate their homes during the Jesucita fire, and thanks to everyone's cooperation and the amazing work of thousands of our first responders, there was no loss of life, and thousands of homes north of Foothill Road was saved. Once again, we saw how our firefighters and police officers, along with thousands of others from throughout California, go above and beyond the call of duty and be our local heroes. And we want to thank them again. And they were not alone. In fact, there were many unsung heroes battling the blaze, and without their work, we would have seen more damage last spring. One example I'd like to highlight is the city's water crew, who kept the water flowing to put out the fires.
So as it burned down the creek and then up the face, which is basically our fence line, it goes around the perimeter, and Santa Roque Creek continues along down the canyon that way, and it burned all the way to the bridge at 192, where they were able to stop it from going underneath to Stevens Park and the neighborhood there. Aside from trying to secure as much equipment as we could away from the perimeter that maybe normally is kept closer to the fence line, we moved that as far in as we could. Tried to remove anything that was flammable, propane tanks and things from buildings that were probably at the higher risk of catching fire.
On Thursday night, Cater crews were forced to evacuate. They returned 2 hours later to find scorched landscaping and minor damage to the facility. Due to the diligence and dedication of Cater's personnel, uninterrupted water service was provided throughout the entire fire.
The strike teams in the fire department were relying on water to fight the fire and to defend structures, and so we had to keep producing water. And during that period of time, we were at double the normal production that we normally have. Typically it would be around 18 million gallons a day produced, and we were at about 34 for those 3 days.
As I already mentioned, over 30,000 residents successfully evacuated a huge geographic area without major incident due to the cooperation and goodwill of so many Santa Barbara residents and businesses. Just to get a better sense of how many heroes there are right here in this room, please stand or raise your hand if you were one of the 30,000 people evacuated from your home. If you are on standby preparing to evacuate your home or business, keep your hands up, everyone who's... If you reported into work at an emergency operations center or at the Earl Warren Showgrounds to help with firefighting efforts or evacuations. If you volunteered for the Red Cross, an animal shelter, or other organization that assisted evacuees. If your business offered meals, lodging, entertainment, or other services to take care of evacuees. Keep your hands up, everyone. Here we go. This is all good. If you gave friends or family members a place to spend the night. If you provided legal advice, housing assistance, rebuilding information, or other counseling to help those who lost their properties get back on their feet. Or if you covered the workload of your coworkers while they were dealing with evacuation of the loss of their home. We all emerged as local heroes during this emergency because we stood together as a community. So let's give ourselves a round of applause. And thank you, everyone. The good news is that with these fires behind us, there's now very little old chaparral brush in our front country. Here's a quick map showing the footprint of each fire, and you can see that there are only a few pockets left. We know, though, that we still cannot afford to drop our guard for even a moment. Another fire can still erupt, and we also have the aftermath of the recent fires with the risk for floods and mudslides in the burn areas and below with any heavy rain event. The city continues to prepare for future emergencies. At the top of the list, our newly renovated fire station headquarters on Carrillo Street will improve coordination between public agencies, residents, and businesses during an emergency. Completed last December, the Fire Station 1 is now up to current seismic building codes and has a new state-of-the-art emergency operations center. Here's a glimpse of our community's recovering efforts from the recent fires and what risks still lie ahead.
The Tea Fire's devastation not only led to the destruction of 151 structures in the city of Santa Barbara, it left portions of our city vulnerable to flooding and mudslides. Because of the loss of vegetation after a wildfire, the soil is less absorbent, which means any amount of rainfall can ultimately lead to problems. Yet even though the added flood risk will affect the city for 3 to 5 years, the community is doing all it can to minimize the threat. With the city, county, and property owners' collaboration and extensive planning, we are more prepared to get through this rainy season safely.
We've seen through Santa Barbara's history that fires can cause some pretty traumatic results, and so we had to take the situation seriously and then work towards developing a plan and then implementing that plan.
That plan involved clearing stream beds and debris basins, hydromulching, and also they installed additional debris racks. The final and possibly most critical step took place not in the creek beds, but through communication.
What's almost as important as any of those items is working with the public and making sure that they had the tools, the knowledge, and then hopefully the will to go forward and do the work that they needed to do to help protect themselves, and they did.
This will and initiative of residents to prepare themselves and their properties, combined with the hard work of city and county staff, has been a successful combination. The same planning and preparation that has so far kept residents safe this rainy season has also earned the city an important national designation. Santa Barbara is now a storm-ready community. Issued by NOAA, storm-ready communities are better prepared for severe weather through advanced planning, education, and awareness. No community is storm-proof, but storm-ready preparation can help communities save lives. In areas of the city affected by the Tea Fire, the rebuilding process is an uplifting sight. Of the 151 homes destroyed within city limits, 86 are either rebuilt, under construction, or almost ready to start construction.
Once they submit officially to our front counter, our building permit counter, their project goes to the top of our plan check review list. We do realize that the Tea Fire victims, many of them didn't have a place to live. One of the options the city looked at and eventually City Council approved is to allow temporary trailers to be placed at the site while the home is being constructed. The overall goal of implementing these procedures and trailers and all the things that the city has done is really to help the victims through the process. Losing a home is a traumatic event, and so we at the city don't want to contribute to that, so we want to make this as painless as possible as they go through our process.
Living in Santa Barbara with its majestic surroundings, it's easy to forget the natural disasters that can horribly affect our lives. But with some groundwork, teamwork, and community involvement, we can prevent the worst from happening.
We had a lot of rain. We haven't had a lot of damage. We still have a lot of winter left in front of us, but the results have been encouraging so far. And if you look up on the hillsides and you see the amount of green that's up there right now, our watersheds are on their way to recovery. We've got a couple of years left in front of us, but we've got a good start.
The residents who lost their home are to be commended for their perseverance. And now I'd like us to focus on a different type of emergency response, how we plan to address our budget within the local economic climate. City Administrator Jim Armstrong will first give an overview of the city's financial condition and the obstacles we'll need to overcome. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much, Mayor Schneider. I'm once again very pleased to provide you with a brief overview of the fiscal issues facing our city. These are very challenging times, and over the next few months, we will be making critical decisions that could impact the entire community. The Mayor and City Council, as well as myself, will need not only your support, but also your understanding as we look at the services this community can afford to provide. It will not be an easy period. From a governmental finance standpoint, cities and counties are facing the most difficult era since the Great Depression. Major revenues have dropped dramatically, yet the demand for government services continues to grow. The question facing the city is not whether we will need to reduce services, but how much and in what area. Today I will again focus primarily on the city's general fund, which is that portion of the city that provides traditional governmental services such as police and fire, parks and recreation, libraries, planning, and building safety. These parts of city government are impacted the most by the current recession because their primary funding is derived from tax revenues rather than user fees, charges, grants, or lease revenues. The other part of city government is what we call enterprise operations. These are a series of standalone businesses such as the airport, the waterfront, our water system, our wastewater system, our downtown parking operation, and our municipal golf course. Each of these operations is funded primarily through user fees, lease revenues, and grant funding rather than general taxes. As a result, although they have been impacted by the current recession, they are able to weather the current crisis much more easily. It is also important to note that for the most part, we are legally unable to move money from these enterprise operations into the city's general fund to pay for those traditional government services such as police and fire. So to put it in perspective, the city's total budget is approximately $250 million. Of that amount, $104 million goes towards the city's general fund, with the remainder being spent by our enterprise operations and restricted funding areas. Of the city's 1,079 employees, 643 work in general funded operations, with the remainder working in the enterprise operations and in restricted funding areas. Now I'd like to focus directly on the challenges being faced by the city's general fund. As I mentioned earlier, the city's general fund is supported primarily from taxes, and it's no surprise to this audience that we are seeing unprecedented declines in several of these critical revenue sources. For example, retail sales taxes have declined from a high of $20.5 million in 2008 to a projected $16.4 million this year. This represents an overall decline of 20%. In fact, we have lost 11 years of growth in this revenue source in the past 2 years. Transient occupancy taxes, the tax that we apply to visitors to the community, have also declined from a high of $12.9 million in 2008 to only $10.9 million in the current year. And that's a loss of 6 years revenue growth, and it's a decline of 15%. Property taxes, our largest revenue source at $23 million, has also declined by 1% this year and is expected to decline by another 1% next year. According to the county, this is the first decline in property tax assessments since Proposition 13 was approved by the voters 32 years ago. On the expense side, over 75% of all our expenditures go towards wages, benefits, and retirement expenses for our employees. This ratio is pretty typical for local governments. Our primary product is service, and the largest expense we face is for the people who provide those services. The remainder goes towards supplies, vehicle expenses, building expenses, utility costs, training, and insurance. What this means, of course, is if revenues go down dramatically, as they have over the past 2 years, we have to focus most of our energy towards reducing expenses for personnel. During the current fiscal year, we have already taken the following actions in response to the economic crisis. We have eliminated 37 positions from the city's general fund, and we're holding another 51 positions vacant. We implemented a mandatory furlough for nearly all of our non-safety employees that resulted in a one-time pay reduction of 5%. We have suspended other employee benefits throughout the entire organization. We've eliminated all non-essential travel and training. We've extended vehicle and equipment replacement schedules, and we have cut back on nearly all capital spending in the city's general fund, which includes parks projects, facility improvements, modernizing critical software systems, and some basic repairs. Unfortunately, the steps we have implemented are still not enough. During the current fiscal year, we're still seeing revenues decline greater than our projections. And as a result, we're looking at additional steps for the current year, such as fire station brownouts, to avoid using budget reserves. The most significant challenge we are facing now, however, is to balance next year's budget, and that's the year that begins July 1st, 2010. Based upon our most recent projections, the deficit next year totals approximately $9 million, assuming we take no corrective actions. So what's our strategy for dealing with next year's budget? The first element of our strategy is to ask our labor unions to agree to wage and benefit concessions that could solve a large portion of this problem. For example, if we can secure concessions totaling 10% of total compensation, we can generate nearly $7 million in savings. But of course, that will not be an easy task. The city has 7 separate labor unions representing nearly 90% of our full-time employees. Some of these unions have existing contracts in place that provide for additional increases in pay over the next few months. While no one likes to take a pay cut or a reduction in benefits, reaching agreements with our labor unions is critical if we are to avoid major cuts in services to the public. However, if we're unable to reach agreements with our labor unions, we need to be prepared to reduce the city's budget and bring our spending into line with revenues. So on a parallel track, I have asked each department head to identify options within their department for potential cuts. Since the police and fire departments use nearly 70% of the general tax revenues received by the city, there is simply no way to exclude these 2 departments from potential reductions. Both Chief Sanchez and our new Fire Chief Andy Demizio are committed to maintaining adequate levels of public safety and are working to minimize impacts on the community. But they also understand the need to live within the city's resources. I want to emphasize that this strategy is not intended to be a scare tactic or to raise undue alarm. It's simply a question of basic mathematics. There's no way to balance the city's budget with cuts only unless all departments reduce their expenditures. That's why I'm strongly encouraging all of our labor unions to work with us to find ways to reduce wages and benefits so we can avoid drastic cuts in all parts of our organization. We will also be looking at all other facets of the city organization to find ways to become more efficient, reduce bureaucracy, and in some cases, get out of certain business lines. However, we have already implemented most of the easy solutions, and only difficult decisions remain. I also want to stress that the financial challenges being faced by the city of Santa Barbara are in no way unique to us or the result of bad decisions in the past. Instead, they are a direct result of the economy and the major decline in our most important revenue sources. The economic factors impacting city government are no different than the forces that are impacting every person in this room, in your businesses, and in your personal retirement accounts. As you know in reading the local media, our county is facing similar problems, and of course our local education institutions have all been heavily impacted by state budget cuts. When I talk to my colleagues in other cities and counties throughout the state, I hear a common theme. Sales tax revenues statewide are down around 20%. Bed taxes in most of the state are also down by 20%. And in many cases, property taxes are down by 5%. As a result, nearly all cities and counties are looking at major cuts throughout their organizations, and they're also pleading with their labor unions to accept wage and benefit concessions to mitigate service cuts. We will be presenting our proposed budget to the City Council on April the 20th, and the Council will be conducting a series of workshops during April, May, and June. I expect there will be many lively discussions, and I encourage you all to participate in that process. I also encourage you to support the Mayor and City Council, as well as the city's executive staff, during this difficult period. There's always a tendency during times like this to point fingers or merely attempt to protect a certain program or service. But please remember that in the final analysis, the City Council will need to make some very tough decisions in order to maintain the city's financial integrity. Before I conclude my remarks, I also want to express my sincere appreciation to the fine group of department heads and key management staff who work for our city. They've devoted their lives to public service and care deeply about the quality of life in Santa Barbara. In most cases, they work behind the scenes to make sure that the Santa Barbara we all know and love stays safe, beautiful, and has the array of amenities that our citizens desire. I cannot tell you how much each of them have struggled over the past several months trying to find that last dollar, or to save an individual employee's job, or to preserve a certain service that matters to our community. I'm proud of the group of department heads and key managers that work for the city, and I'm very proud to have them as a part of our team. Now I'd like to turn the program back to Mayor Schneider.
Thank you, Jim. We're fortunate to have you as a close partner with our council as we address fiscal year 2011 in the budget in the months to come. It's vital that cities do not lose local funds for local services via taking, borrowing, diverting, or otherwise siphoning money from local government. And the League of California Cities is working with a growing coalition of business leaders, public safety, transportation organizations, and many other community groups to put an initiative on the November 2010 ballot. And I'd like to point out the League's representative, Dave Mullinex, who's right over there in the audience. I encourage you to meet him, find out more information about how to assist their efforts, and there's a booth out in the lobby. There's something else everyone in this room can do that will secure local funds for local purposes, and that is to get counted. This is the year of the census. You'll be receiving your census form in the mail this week, and the deadline to mail in the forms is coming up soon on April 1st. We cannot afford to take this process for granted. And just to put the census count in local context, Santa Barbara stands to lose $30,000 in funding for every single person missed in the count. Please encourage your business to help the Census Bureau with a complete count. Make sure everyone sends in their form. Remind people that the census forms are completely confidential, where even law enforcement and other governmental agencies will not be able to see your form. These forms are sealed for 72 years. For residents who are non-English speakers or need more information, tell them to visit one of the many special assistance centers at the Franklin Center, Westside Center, Central Library, and at La Casa de la Raza. This is a once-in-a-decade chance to provide benefits for all of us. Another opportunity in front of us is finding innovative ways where the city and businesses can work together towards economic development. We need to talk with each other on a frequent basis to share ideas and perhaps remove some bureaucratic red tape that inhibits economic development. Towards that end, I've started to work with city staff to organize quarterly meetings with representatives of specific business sectors. My goal is to gain a better understanding of your challenges and talk about ways we can improve business conditions. We're learning more every day about how being environmentally strong can also be economically sound. The decisions we make every day to reduce our energy output can also save us significant dollars. The city continues to look for opportunities to retrofit our own electrical systems and generate renewable energy we plan for new construction or renovations. And through these efforts, the city has now surpassed the Kyoto Protocol greenhouse gas emission targets. Our emissions are actually at 15% below than they were in 1990. Thank you. Buildings are responsible for 40% of greenhouse gas emissions nationwide. And with new solar panels and green building materials, Fire Station 1 received a LEED Gold certification and is one of 3 city facilities that achieved LEED status this year. As many of you know, LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it's considered the highest achievement that can be awarded to a green building. The other 2 LEED certifications recently awarded are the airport's new rent-a-car quick turnaround facility, which also earned a gold certification, and includes solar panels on the rooftops that generate 75% of all electricity needed at the site, and a LEED Platinum certification for remodeling our community development and public works building at 630 Garden Street, one of only 6 LEED Platinum buildings in the world in relation to the building's ongoing maintenance. At this site, we upgraded to energy efficiency lighting and converted the HVAC systems to allow outside air to cool the building. And with rebates from Southern California Edison and some of our own funds, we're expecting this project to save us $81,000 on our electric bill each year. Certainly, our role is not only to be efficient in our own facilities, we should also educate our residents on best practices on how they, too, can reduce their energy costs and save money. I'm pleased to report a new financial incentive that's just about ready to launch. With Santa Barbara County at the helm and joining cities throughout the county, you will soon be able to get a low-interest loan as part of your annual property tax assessment for solar panels, energy retrofits, and water conservation projects. This new financing program is due out in April, just in time to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Earth Day. And here's another way your business can go green and save money. On November 1st last year, the city changed the commercial trash rate so that it's to your financial benefit to recycle more and throw less into the landfill. If you look at your bill, you'll see that the more you recycle, the lower your bill. We estimate that businesses that started recycling more have now cumulatively saved $120,000 in just 4 months. We've created a new system for restaurants to compost their food scraps, and as you'll see in this next video, it's starting to pay off.
The city's goal to get food scraps diverted at a place of business really starts with the landfill. A new landfill hasn't been sited in California in over 10 years. So for us to find a new place to put our material is extremely unlikely to happen, at least locally.
The city's food scrap program is designed to extend the life of the landfill, reclaim a valuable resource, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and save businesses money.
We have so much stuff that was going into the trash that was so clearly a compostable food scrap item that just seemed like a perfect idea for us.
Compostable materials are the single largest component of trash coming from Santa Barbara businesses. For restaurants, the percentage more than doubles.
Just to give you an idea of the volume, this was all trash previously, 4 trash carts, 4 pickups a week. Now we're down to this only, and it's getting picked up once a week.
Schools are also fertile ground for the food scraps program.
The kids are great with it. They get it right away. And the kitchen staff likes it because they don't want to see things thrown away. We couldn't have done this without the City of Santa Barbara Environmental Services help, because they came out and did an analysis of our waste stream, which was really critical. So they helped us get the right size containers. They helped us with education. They came out and did presentations for our staff. And had we not had that support, I don't think we could have rolled it out as smoothly as we did.
And young students aren't the only ones learning from the program.
Doing this program has really opened up my eyes and how easy it is to really take care of the planet, and especially with food scraps, you know how easy it is to separate and teach others. And you can go to any of my employees and they'll tell you they'll never thought about recycling in their lives, a lot of them, and now they do.
The food scraps program does something every business, large or small, can appreciate: benefit the bottom line.
We were astounded when we first found out how affordable it was to have the food scraps pickup, the recycling pickup. It's the economical and financially right thing to do.
We're going to save about $7,000 a year in this store alone.
If we can get up to 75% diversion, and that would mean getting all of our cafeterias on food scraps, we would save about $128,000 a year. And that's very significant, particularly now when the budget is so squeezed.
I want to highlight one more local business that has joined our food scraps program, and I mean local. I'm happy to let you know that this morning's breakfast is a zero waste event. And starting today, the DoubleTree Hotel will be composting your food scraps, and they should also expect to see a nice reduction on their trash bill. I think we should give the DoubleTree Hotel staff and our food servers a round of applause for their work and willingness to make this event zero waste. Thanks to our multi-year efforts to reduce, reuse, and recycle, and to the growing participation from businesses and schools in our community, we have met our goal of diverting 70% of our city's waste from the Tejiquas landfill by 2010, 1 year ahead of schedule. That's something to celebrate. Thank you. But we don't want to stop at 70%, so I'll give you one more way to help us improve our diversion rate. You may not know that plastic bags make up 2% of trash going into the landfills. It's hard to believe, but when you consider that each person throws away 500 paper and plastic bags each year, it all starts adding up. Next time you go to the grocery store, remember to ask yourself, where's your bag? The city joined forces with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, Choose to Reuse, and the California Grocers Association to promote the Where's Your Bag campaign. Thanks to the campaign sponsors, please take one of these reusable bags at your seat on your next grocery run. And I want to give special thanks to the participating stores who help their customers see how easy it is to switch to reusable bags. Well, even in these tight economic times, the basic work of the city continues, especially as it relates to upgrading our aging infrastructure and municipal buildings. There are construction projects in virtually every part of the city. We estimate that the monetary value of the city's recent construction and related contracts to local businesses at $11 million this past year. That's significant money creating and maintaining local jobs in the private sector. In addition, because of the economic downturn, the bids are coming in significantly lower than our original estimates, stretching out your tax dollars to fund additional improvements. It's important to note up front that all the city projects I'm about to mention are being funded by the Redevelopment Agency, enterprise funds, federal and state grant funding, property assessments, or private donations, not the general fund. No funds used for these projects are in competition with general fund programs or services. One of the most visible construction projects is the replacement of the Haley and De La Vina Bridge. This bridge was built in 1915 and must be replaced to meet today's standards for vehicles, pedestrians, water flow, and seismic safety. The project will reduce flooding and potential property damage during major storm events. It's part of the Mission Creek flood control efforts, and that entire project will instead extend 1.3 miles from Canon Perdido Street down to Cabrillo Boulevard and onto the ocean. The intersection of Haley and De La Vina Streets will remain closed until fall of next year, and I want to extend my appreciation to the residents and businesses there for their patience during this construction period. Along with the bridge replacement, the West Downtown neighborhood will also benefit from better street lighting and improved sidewalks. And the pedestrian improvements under construction along Ortega and Anapamu Streets between Castillo to Chapala will wrap up by early summer. Up along Cliff Drive on the Mesa, say goodbye to those large, ugly overhead utilities, which will disappear and be replaced by new street lighting. And this project should be completed by the spring of 2011. Moving down towards the harbor, you'll notice the West Beach Pedestrian Improvement Project, which will enhance beach access and pedestrian linkage between Stearns Wharf and the harbor. We expect that with the new plaza areas and public art on the sidewalks, that residents and visitors alike will travel easily between Stearns Wharf and the harbor. And combined with the East Beach sidewalk improvements completed last year, you'll soon see a true promenade all along Cabrillo Boulevard. Also at the harbor, we've begun the first year of construction to replace our 30-year-old marinas. With funds from the California Department of Boating and Waterways, we started improvements to Marina One, the largest marina in the harbor. Much of the shoreside work completed in the past months has been invisible to the eye, but we'll be able to see new docks starting in April. By replacing 2 docks a year, our plan is to finish replacing all the marina docks in 10 years. Way over on the other side of the city, and after many years of planning, we finally broke ground on the long-awaited airline terminal improvement project. You can look forward to several new features, including a centralized baggage claim, restrooms after clearing security, yay, improved accessibility throughout the terminal, and more concessionaires while you wait for your flight. The project also involves a new configuration for the short-term parking lot, a wider loop road with separate lanes for buses and shuttles, and additional loading space for you to get your bags ready at the front curb. The existing historical terminal, built in 1942, will be relocated and refurbished with staff offices and a historical display. Construction completion is on schedule in 2011, and in the meantime, I encourage you to visit the airport website and check for travel updates before you head there. Turning to some of our recreation facilities, the historic Carrillo Recreation Center, built in 1913, is undergoing a major renovation to improve seismic safety and accessibility to meet ADA requirements. This building is used by 100,000 people each year, so we're excited to have this project completed by December 31st. And thanks to a generous private donation from Rose Carrot, we recently renovated the main adult section of the East Side Library. Just a few days ago, we celebrated the completion of this project that added new computers, furniture, and other building upgrades. We're also excited to partner with the Junior League at the Central Library with plans to renovate the basement and build a new children's area. This project is still in design, but once completed, will give a fresh look to one of our oldest facilities. Beyond the city's funded projects, we're also interested in private development projects planned in town, and I want to highlight one of them, the project known as La Entrada on Lower State Street. You may have already heard that the city just granted substantial conformance to the current owner's mountain funding. Originally designed as a mixed-use project of timeshares and commercial space, the new design replaces the timeshares with hotel rooms, includes a new and larger public plaza area, and increases the view corridor to the mountains. We all know that the lack of financing on this project has led to the area becoming a significant eyesore. And to address this plan, part of the substantial conformance approval included some significant conditions, including immediate graffiti abatement and sidewalk improvements. The Californian Hotel and empty project site across the street also must be maintained with temporary landscaping and daily cleanup. With these conditions, it is expected that the area will be maintained at a much higher level until permanent financing is found. The work of city government is not just about taking care of things that make it work. It's also about taking care of our people. And despite our financial difficulties, we cannot lose sight of those most at risk, as we must continue working together to provide safe communities and prevent youth gang violence. Our police department has estimated that there are about 160 hardcore gang members in Santa Barbara and another 750 young people affiliated or at high risk for joining a gang. And our primary role is to keep people safe and enforce against those who choose to threaten or hurt others. Last September, the city's police department coordinated with multiple state and federal law enforcement agencies to simultaneously descend on 7 different locations to conduct searches and serve arrest warrants to individuals tied to criminal street gangs. Known as Operation Ape Hanger, this event resulted in 12 arrests for trafficking illegal firearms and narcotics. This investigation resulted in removing dangerous weapons and diminishing the flow of illegal drugs from the streets of Santa Barbara. Enforcement may be the first thing that comes to mind when you think of reducing gang activity, but it's important to remember the underlying causes of youth joining gangs in the first place. We are deeply committed to proven programs that prevent and end youth violence. And to that end, the city has been coordinating efforts with a multitude of governmental, philanthropic, and nonprofit social service agencies that work directly with our most at-risk youth. We continue to improve ways to coordinate our energy, ideas, and activities. The city cannot, nor should it, work in a vacuum on this issue. And despite financial constraints, we are committed to invest in this important area. Our focus is on enforcement and intervention, working with parents in the neighborhoods and with our school district on prevention strategies. Our police league, also known as PAL, has grown to be quite successful. The PAL program helps at-risk youth interact with police officers for sports and other recreation activities. They take summer camping trips together where police officers are able to mentor them and encourage them to lead healthy lifestyles away from gang activity. After-school programs can play a key role in giving kids healthy alternatives to gangs. Participation in these programs have never been higher. The number of kids involved in after-school sports leagues have almost doubled in the last 2 years. Likewise, participation in the city's summer drop-in program has increased 40% in the same time period. Both of these programs are free, and we've learned that from experience that participation will decline if families start to have to pay for these programs. So as you can imagine, these after-school and recreation programs for at-risk youth are vulnerable to budget cuts that may be ahead. And one way you can help keep these programs is supporting the Park Foundation. They're currently planning a Save Summer for Kids event on April 23rd to raise money for summer youth programs, and I'm sure there'll be opportunities for businesses to get involved. Here's an example of a great public-private partnership, the city's Fun on the Run mobile recreation program. After a funding shortfall last year, grant funding from the Santa Barbara Foundation and Wood Clayson's Foundation helped put the van back on the streets. The van, which is loaded with activities, arts and crafts, and sports equipment, visits East Side and West Side neighborhoods to serve low-income 2nd through 8th graders after school who are unable to participate in traditional recreation programs due to the lack of transportation, financial setbacks, or for other reasons. And the staff mentors the kids and serves as positive role models. I want to quote Steve Cushman in a previous meeting as another way you can get involved, which is give a kid a job. And I'd like to introduce Whitney Collins, who works with the Workforce Investment Board Job Training Program, who is right over there. Thank you. Funded with economic stimulus funding, his program arranges job opportunities for at-risk teens and pays their salary. Your only responsibility is to help them gain workforce experience. Please talk with Whitney and see if your business can help a teen gain work skills, self-confidence, and get ready for a future career. Another community-wide issue that we cannot turn our backs on is homelessness. While bringing our community home, the Santa Barbara's countywide 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness is seeing positive results with over 350 chronically homeless people now off the streets. The economic downturn has placed many more people at risk of homelessness, and significant cuts in social services funding has left some without a safety net. Since January 2009, over 30 homeless people have died on the streets of the South Coast, many of them within city limits, and this is unacceptable. The city is working with the County of Santa Barbara and other South Coast cities to determine how we can work as a region. And as an immediate response, during rainy and especially cold nights this winter, the Rescue Mission and a variety of churches throughout the county have voluntarily opened warming centers, and it has immediately tremendously helped. There's been no additional deaths of homeless people on the South Coast in the last 8 weeks. Another accomplishment was securing $1.2 million in economic stimulus funding over the next 3 years for service providers to prevent evictions and homelessness. Assisting people before they lose their home is one of the best ways for us to get ahead on this issue. And also last year, a city council committee worked with local businesses, faith-based groups, housing providers, and social services organizations to develop a 12-point strategy on homelessness and community relations. These strategies include improving communication between police officers and street outreach workers, creating a funding partnership with the downtown organization to provide additional police presence on State Street, updating and adopting a stronger anti-panhandling ordinance in the downtown core, lower Milpas area, and waterfront area, and creating an alternate giving campaign that will redirect money given to panhandlers to street outreach efforts. And I invite and encourage your business to be one of the founding members of the Alternate Giving Program by contacting the downtown organization by the end of this month. With your support, we can get more people connected to housing and other supportive services that successfully address the mental illness and drug or alcohol addiction. This Housing First model works and has been proven throughout the country. It reduces the public cost of homelessness, where people otherwise move around the revolving door between jail, the emergency rooms, detox and shelter facilities, and back on the streets. Here's one great example. As part of the PBS show, California's Communities, Huell Hauser recently visited El Carrillo and interviewed people who are able to make a transition from homelessness to self-sufficiency.
Your name is?
Steve St. Ange.
All right, and you know what we're doing? We're visiting all the residents here, a lot of them.
Yeah, I've seen you walking around.
Tell us why you're here. What got you here? What got you homeless in the first place?
I was a heroin addict by the time I was 15.
Yeah.
And I didn't stop until I got hit by a train 4 years ago.
That's how you lost your leg?
Yes.
Now, how did you get here?
Okay.
Because you were obviously rock bottom.
Rock bottom. Okay. I spent 40 years of hell. You know, my mother didn't sleep for 40 until I got clean.
Worried about you?
Yes. I grew up in an upper middle class family. I grew up on the beach in Santa Barbara, you know, and here I was living in bushes alongside the freeway because of my addiction. This place definitely has played a major part in my life turning around. Without El Carrillo and the staff here, I don't know if I could have made it. It was really rough, Huell. That's all I can do is tell my story. And maybe somebody will catch a little bit of it, but I'll tell you what, I went from the homeless shelter and moved my way up and got a bed at the Salvation Army, and that was like a step up. And then this place was opening, and just by the hair of my chinny chin chin, I got in at the last minute, and by the grace of God, here I am.
We want to see where you work, and you work
at Our Daily Bread.
Right
here.
Here.
Yes.
So you're off today.
I am off today.
Come on, let's crowd in here. Okay. Because this looks like a really nice kind of a community bakery.
Yes, it is. It's our local bakery here. It's been here about 27 years, and we sell all kinds of breads and pastries. And
now, you've worked here how long?
About a year and a half.
And you've lived at El Carrillo how long?
I lived there for about a year, and then I moved over to the Downtown Workers Building,
right.
Which is...
So did they help you get the job?
Well, they helped me motivate me and get my self-esteem back, so I was able to go out there and look for a job.
But you came in here and...
Yes, and I
interviewed for this job.
Yes, and my boss right over there hired me. That's
Hello,
Beto.
how you doing?
I know that Rob Pearson from the Housing Authority is in the audience right over there, and working closely with the City Housing Authority, the city's redevelopment agency has invested heavily in permanent supportive housing projects like El Carrillo. The next project in the pipeline is Artisan Court on East Coda Street, and this project will provide 55 units for housing for formerly homeless people, low-income downtown workers, and foster care youth transitioning out of the state system. Finally, one of the largest issues to come before the City Council will be the General Plan Update, also known as Plan Santa Barbara. In the year ahead, we will determine the balance required between open housing, open space, and transportation policies to ensure a diverse community 20 years from now. This next video will recap the Plan Santa Barbara process and highlight the important decisions ahead for City Council.
Santa Barbara is well known for its natural beauty, active lifestyle, and small-town feel. It also prides itself on its rich history and well-preserved heritage. Santa Barbara looks and feels the way it does in large part due to active residents who have been involved with the direction of their city. For over 40 years, the city has maintained a general plan to preserve and enhance the community's assets. The plan establishes policy direction for the long-term development of the city. It addresses the many components essential to a well-functioning community, such as land use, traffic, housing, public services and safety, and parks and open space.
The thing that we all love about Santa Barbara is that it has developed, over history with a plan. It had a goal, it had a vision, and it gave us something to really attain.
It's really important, I think, for the community, and this has been 20 years since the last time we did it, to lay out the future of where we want to go, primarily from a development standpoint. Measure E, which was a really important growth control measure that was adopted by the voters in 1989, is just now expiring, and so what's the next 20-year increment of commercial growth? And then housing. We've seen a lot of housing pressure through the 90s and the early part of the 2000s. But we were getting units and large luxury units downtown that wasn't really hitting the need for our community. And so taking a step back and seeing what do we want this next increment of growth over the next 20 years to be, and how do we want it to hit the needs of the community going forward.
Building consensus has not always been easy in the Plan Santa Barbara process, but there are several areas where community opinion has come together. Most agree that we should regulate future growth, live within our resources, prioritize affordable housing, require smaller units, preserve Santa Barbara's historic small-town character, enhance our active, healthy, and walkable community, and plan for sustainable neighborhoods. However, there are areas where people do not agree, such as building heights, density, parking standards, inclusionary housing, and the priority of implementation actions.
Change is happening whether we like it or not, and we can either embrace it and make the most out of it, which is what I think our best opportunity would be, or you can fight it and just have friction and heat all along the way. And I don't think that's the approach. That isn't what planning is about. Planning means allowing the future to happen and make the most of it. And we need to acknowledge the changes that are taking place and yet recognize the values of what we've had in the past and how do we keep those alive as we move forward.
One of the key things of this update that we got to keep in mind is the economic vitality of our community going forward. It's one of the key goals that Council's laid out from the very beginning, to make sure we're making strategic and good decisions that maintain our quality of life but also maintain our economic vitality, so that we maintain jobs, good paying jobs for our citizens, and also the revenue to support the important services that government can provide. So we really need the business community's input in looking at these documents, and it's really going to be getting down to it because you'll be able to react to documents now. You know, we've had a lot of theoretical discussions and kind of kicked issues around. Now we're going to be responding to draft documents, and so this really is a crucial time for everyone to get involved.
It's not about us. I won't be here to see the results of what we're doing, and I think most of the people that are speaking about issues today won't be here either. So we need to step outside of ourselves to really make this work. And we really need to pretend that we are our children or our grandchildren, and what would they want us to be doing?
As was said in the video, there are passionate viewpoints on many sides of this issue, and I strongly encourage you to get involved in Plan Santa Barbara and participate in the community dialogue. This Thursday, the city is hosting a public open house to review the Plan Santa Barbara policy documents and draft environmental impact report. I invite you to attend the open house at the Faulkner Gallery in the Central Library. Check out the maps and ask questions. The general plan update will play a critical role shaping the future of our city. This morning I've highlighted some of the most pressing issues facing our city. I know that it's easy to feel discouraged about the current economic situation, but despite our financial hardships, we cannot lose sight of our priorities. This is a time when we all need to take a step back and figure out what we can do to get back on track. I want to assure you that the council and staff at every level of City Hall is actively working on these challenges and taking action wherever we can. We're applying for grants that help us tackle the projects we would be unable to do. We are investing in the future of our streets, bridges, airport, marina, libraries, and recreation centers. We're coming up with innovative ways to make a difference in areas involving youth violence prevention and homelessness, two vulnerable areas when it comes to looming budget cuts. But we cannot do it alone. As we mentioned earlier, next year's financial gap is at $9 million. The county is also hurting with a $39 million gap. Meanwhile, the school district is attempting to cut $6 million from their operations. We've truly reached a point where we have to leverage the remaining resources we have and be strategic moving forward. There are very specific ways you, as a leader in this community, can help. And I've mentioned a number of possibilities this morning to get you started. I encourage you to share some of the information you've learned today when you interact with your employees and customers. Volunteer, get involved, give a kid a job. If everyone in this room decided to complete just one small task to assist our community in these tough times, either with your time, your treasure, or your talents, just think of the good that can come with that. We all want the same things: a beautiful, safe city, a place to work, recreate, relax, and enjoy, and the ability to live to our fullest potential. If you have a specific idea on how we can work together, we want to hear from you. Our paths are closely intertwined, and our success in meeting our challenges and creating new opportunities lie with us. Thank you for listening.